I laid down the bike and stalked off toward the house, arguing about mom being of another generation and not overstanding me. This, of course, was a genuine cop-out. I had encapsulated my block of reality into a tamper-proof world that made every other point of view absurd. This was especially so if I felt the other point of view was threatening to my livelihood. Once in the house, I went to my room, shut the door, and sat on the bed. Little Monster was out campaigning, so I began sorting through our oldie collection. Actually, the records belonged to Little Monster, who was, and still is, an ardent oldie fan. I dug out something fitting and placed it on the turntable. "I'm Still Here" by the Larks came screaming over the stereo, and I fell back on my bed and let the lyrics seep in. The refrain, "I'm still here," kept lifting me up. It held a special meaning to me after being shot 6 times. I'm still here. I dressed and dozed off with the refrain still resounding in my ear, though the record had long been off. I got up the following morning and pulled on some fresh Ben Davis jeans, a sweatshirt, and croaker sack shoes made from burlap. I gathered up my mom's car keys to go to the store for some cereal. When I began rolling out of the driveway, I found I was blocked by an unmarked police car. 2 American detectives got out and approached the driver's side of the car, so I got out. One of them asked if I was Kody Ch. I replied that I was. The other then produced a piece of paper from the inner pocket of his suit coat. He explained that they had apprehended the guy who shot me. When I asked who he was, he said Pretty Boy. I knew who Pretty Boy was. He, like Crazy D and me, was fiercely loyal to his hood and had on many occasions shot or shot at our homies. This was widely known. In fact, after his involvement in Twinkie's death, he was elevated to threat level 2 and put on our most wanted list. I knew he hadn't shot me, but to try to explain this to these two would be futile. The paper the officer handed me was a subpoena to appear in court as a witness to Pretty Boy's shooting. I took the paper and threw it into the car and they left. I made my way to the store and back without further incident. When I returned, I found my mother and my niece, Tamara, in the front garden cleaning out weeds. I spoke to them briefly and then went into the house to enjoy a big bowl of cereal as I was quite hungry. My mom's house is a moderate 3-bedroom mid-60s dwelling with 2 huge picture windows on either side of the front door. When the drapes are open, one can see clear into the house. We had a nice front lawn and a huge rubber tree out on the yard that gave us great shade in the summer and camouflaged military launches at night. Right in front of the porch was a beautiful garden that Mom took great pride in keeping up. It was in this garden that she and Tamara now worked as Little Monster and I sat staring out of the picture window eating Raisin Bran. As I lifted a spoonful of cereal to my mouth, a car drove past at a slow observer's pace. I stopped in mid-motion and let the face of the staring occupant sink in. Enemy 60. 60s, I shouted to little bro, who had already recognized them and was heading down the hallway toward our room and the cache of weapons now stored there. Once we had seized 2 weapons, both long-barrel shotguns, we made it back to the front room just in time to see the vehicle turn up into the driveway and begin to come back our way. Perhaps their intent was to shoot into the house, shoot Mom, or simply undertake a reconnaissance mission. Whatever it was, we had no intention of letting them leave this block. As they began approaching us, going westbound, the driver closest to the house, we burst through the door and leapt over Mom and Tamara and ran top speed toward the car, weapons level. When Mom recognized what was happening, she shouted for Tamara to go into the backyard. Before the driver could mount a response, we were within killing distance of them. Leveling the barrel to the driver's head, I shouted, "This is 83rd Street, motherfucker," and pulled the trigger. The gun was on safety. If there is a God, he was between me and that driver, because the driver for sure was dead that morning. Ducking down into the seat and swerving sharply to the right, he punched the accelerator, jumped the curb, and ran down Miss Buck's fence. Now, Mom said nothing as we retreated past her and back into the house. We ate the rest of our cereal with guns in one hand and spoons in the other. It was this particular incident that rang the bells in Mom's head that said, "Hey, this thing is serious." No sooner had we finished our cereal, not 10 minutes after the incident, than a black and white patrol car came to a halt in front of our house. Bending down so as not to be seen by the police, we darted down the hallway to stash the straps. We both discarded our clothes and donned bathrobes to shake a description, in case someone had seen us in action earlier. We then heard talking up the front. "Is Kody Scott your son?" one of the policemen asked my mom. "Yes, Kody is my son. Why?" "Well, man, we have a warrant for his arrest for murder and 6 counts of attempted murder." "Oh," Mom began with a slight chuckle. "You must be mistaken. Kody was just released from the hospital 2 days ago. He could not have possibly killed anyone. Well, we have several eyewitnesses who say it was in fact Kody who they saw." His voice sounded no nonsense. "Well," Mom said, trying another angle, "can you call the station to make sure it's Kody you want?" "Ma'am, we are sure who we want. Now, is Kody here?" "Yes, he's here." "Kody," Mom called after me. After hearing as much as I needed to, I began to get dressed. Me and little bro hugged and said our goodbyes. I strapped forward and allowed the police, henceforth soldier cops, to take me in. Some brims had said that while they were shooting dice in the park, Harvard Park, I stepped out of the shadows with, of all things, a double barrel and blasted them. This was supposed to have happened the same night that I was released from the hospital. Once again, I found myself in solitary confinement at the Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. But this time, I was in bad physical condition from the shooting and the operation. I had the cast on my arm with the hood struck up all over it, along with the names of some homies. After my standard week in the box, I was transferred to CD. In Los Padrinos, the housing units are designated by alphabet. I had pretty much been in them all. When I got to CD, I met up with Queek from A. Trey Hoover. He and I were the only Crips in the entire unit. All of the new Africans were Bloods, and the Chicanos and the Americans were strongly supporting them. There were approximately 25 people in the day room. At least 13 were new Africans and the rest Chicano or American. There were 20 plastic chairs on the metal frames welded together in rows of 5. These were situated in front of an old black and white television. Queek and I sat there primarily because to sit any other place would be foolish. We also wanted to stipulate the distinction between us and them, Crips and Bloods. Most of the Bloods were Pyrus from Compton. Every so often, as if on cue, one of the Pyrus would leap to his feet and shout, "All the Rus in the house say ho," at which time everyone except Queek and me would jump to their feet, frantically shouting ho. This went on throughout the night at hour intervals, but no one approached Queek or me personally. The next day, while Queek and I sat on our bench, our meager territory, and talked, we drew some pretty mean stares from the chair section. Once, in the course of conversation, I said "cuz" to Queek, and the whole day room felt abruptly silent. Even the characters on television seemed to pause and look over at us. No one moved, no one said a thing. But then, as if he were an ambassador to the UN, Baby Boo from Miller Gangster Bloods cleared his throat and started walking over toward us. He was a viciously ugly person with a huge jug head, which was covered with small braids in no fixed pattern. His complexion was dark, but not that shiny smooth darkness like Marcus Garvey or Cicely Tyson. It was a flat darkness, broken in spots by chickenpox marks that had become infected from scratching. His eyes held no light, no humor, no remorse. His eyes each had black rings around them, and they were sunk in deeply into their sockets. His lips and nose were uncut African from the continent. I would guess he weighed 170 pounds then, quite muscular with a broad chest. He stopped in front of me. "What did you say?" he asked, looking down on me with total ugliness. I looked at Queek for some sign of mutual liability, but my stare went unacknowledged. I stood up so he would not have the advantage of a downswing. I said "cuz" to my homeboy, I replied. Murmurs from the chair section began to grow louder. "You must not know where you at, Blood. This is our unit, and we don't allow no punk-ass crabs over here. I should knock you out, boy." Far from being a fool, I took a step backward out of his firing range. "And what you think I'm gonna be doing while you knocking me out?" I shot back, hoping I hadn't made him too mad, because for sure I was in no physical shape to fight anybody, especially him. "What?" he started and made a quick step in my direction. I took one step back, and a brother, whom I hadn't even noticed, came between us, but facing Baby Boo. "Man, stall dude out. You see he all fucked up, casting shit," the brother said to Baby Boo. "Fuck that fool. He don't know where he at or something." I know where I'm at, I managed to stay. The staff was becoming suspicious as the day room had grown too quiet. Shit, everything was fine as long as there were Pyru shouts every hour, I guess. But the quiet was out of order. You, a Chicano staff member said, pointing at me, "Come on in there." He gestured at his office. When I went in and sat down, he asked what the problem was. I told him that there was no problem, but he wasn't buying it. "Oh, I see, you a Crip." And he continued, turning his head to read the graffiti on my cast. "You were from ETG, A-Trade Gangster, huh?" "Yeah, that's where I'm from." "Well then, that explains it. You were starting confusion in my unit," he said matter of factly. "Man, I ain't starting nothing in your unit," I tried to explain. At this, he opened a desk drawer and brought out a red marker. "Paint your cast, cause the gang graffiti is a problem," he said, pushing the marker toward me. "I ain't coloring my cast dead, a disrespectful term for red. You must be crazy." "Oh, well, we'll see about that." He reached for the phone, dialed and talked with someone. 5 minutes later, a new African man came in. "What's happening?" he said. The Chicano cat explained as best he could, which wasn't too good. When he had finished, the brother simply asked, "You a Crip?" "Yup." "Are you a real Crip?" "Yup." "Here then, paint your cast blue," he said, handing me a blue marker. Perhaps this was a ploy, and he thought I wouldn't do it because of my situation. Well, I did. I broke open that marker and painted my cast Crip blue. The brother just stared. The Chicano was visibly upset. I went back out into the day room and had no further problems that night. The next morning, I went to court and got arraigned on murder and attempted murder charges. Because of the serious nature of the crime, I was being tried as an adult. This meant I would face the same time as any adult would face for the case. 60 years to life was the maximum penalty. Also, because their decision to try me as an adult, I had to stay in East Lake Juvenile Hall, also known as Central. Los Padrinos did not house juveniles who were being tried as adults. This was cool with me because Crazy D and other homies were at Central. I've always preferred it over LP anyway. I was put in EF Central like LP designates their units by alphabet, EF and GH, where all the hardcore bangers were housed. In EF, we had staff from South Central who treated us like family. There was Brother Blackburn who let Crazy D use his radio so we could go into the law library and jam. He also let us go into the unit office and lift weights. There was Brother Doc who gave us his cell phone all the time. He let us stay back from school and just kick it. He also tried to flirt with our mothers during visiting hours. There was Stewart, Aaron, and Cryer, but our favorite cat was a brother named Gaines. He was a strong brother with genuine concern for our people of color. He was also the source of power in EF.